This is my practice video for the informational speech on academic burnout. Academic burnout is something that many students experience. I personally have had lots of experience with this. When I was younger, I used to love school a lot, and I also really loved learning. I did very well in school and outside of school with anything academical. I also was pretty smart from a young age, and I was pretty advanced in especially reading, but also kind of in everything, not to sound cocky. And then as I got older, I slowly stopped loving learning and slowly stopped loving school, and while I still do pretty well in school, I'm an all-A student, I don't have the same feelings that I did have towards school that I used to, and I don't have the same love for school or learning. And this has happened due to many things, and I think a huge part of it is the high expectations I've faced. I've always faced high expectations, especially from my mom, and then also from school. Because of these high expectations from others, I've put high expectations onto myself that have helped lead to my burnout. And it's also made me up into a perfectionist, which has also led to my burnout. I have now experienced the main 3 effects of burnout, and I procrastinate all the time, like with this speech, and I also don't have the same love towards learning. What even is academic burnout, and what are its effects? Academic burnout has 3 main effects known as school exhaustion, cynicism, and academic inadequacy. School exhaustion happens and can most commonly be seen when we see students who just feel tired at school, and anything that has to do with school, like homework, projects, tests, learning, just creates a tiring feeling. A lot of these students can start their morning very energized and then go to school and instantly their energy goes down. This is a feeling that I've heard lots of students describe, and it happens very commonly with academic burnout, and it just makes them exhausted at the end of the day too, because they've spent their entire day losing this energy. And then they go home and they're expected to do schoolwork or to study, and they just don't have the energy for it anymore. The next thing is cynicism. This is the belief that school has no benefit, which I think is probably the most popular thing I see. I see students asking all the time, when are we going to use this? What is this important for? Why do I need to know this? And they lose the idea that school has any benefit, and they lose the idea that school is important. This creates a lot of apathy within students. Lots of teachers, especially now, are hearing about apathy and talking about apathetic students, which are basically just students who don't care at all, and this is causing a lot of teachers to struggle so much, and we've seen a rise in apathy, which is basically like cynicism, in students recently. This causes teachers to struggle to teach, so even the students who aren't struggling with academic burnout and who aren't apathetic are facing side effects of this academic burnout. And the students who are apathetic and who do have cynicism, they're not caring as much, so they're not doing their schoolwork. They're not trying because they just don't care anymore because they see no benefit. Another thing is academic inadequacy. This is basically when the students have very high expectations and they're not meeting these expectations. So this can be very different depending on the student and what their levels have been. If you're a student who's always been a B student, your academic burnout may look like struggling to get that B. But for me, maybe it's struggling to get that A. And this can be different across the board, but it's not meeting those expectations that they've had. What are the real life effects of this? Grades are dropping, students are procrastinating, and the kids just don't care. Many students who are struggling with academic burnout have dropping grades and struggle to pass their classes. They also have a higher dropout rate, and they have less chances of graduating high school. Another really important thing about academic burnout that isn't talked about as much is its effects on mental health. Students who are facing academic burnout are more likely to also suffer from things like depression and anxiety and other mental illnesses, or to just struggle with their mental health in general. A lot of the things caused by academic burnout are things that we see in academic burnout are also commonly seen in students who have these mental illnesses, and a lot of these mental illnesses could help lead these students to academic burnout. How is academic burnout even caused? One of the main ways that academic burnout can be caused is by high expectations. These expectations can come from others and from themselves. Sometimes they come from parents, where parents have these very high expectations of their kids to succeed, to be super smart, to be super great. And a lot of the time, these students are then creating high expectations for themselves, which they are carrying with them. Sometimes these high expectations can come from a school. Maybe a student goes to a school that just has very high expectations for their students. Or maybe their teachers expect a lot of them. Or maybe it's a specific class. But somewhere they've had high expectations from others or from themselves that most likely stemmed from others. And the idea or the actions of not meeting these expectations cause an academic burnout. It creates a very strong feeling of failure. If you're constantly trying to meet this expectation and you can never make it, it's going to make you feel very burnt out, which is what happens to most people who have academic burnout. Another thing that these high expectations can do is create perfectionism. Students who have perfectionism are going to kind of face the same idea where they have these high expectations that they can't meet. If you are trying to be a perfectionist and you're constantly trying to be perfect and you're never reaching it, it's going to be creating an idea of burnout. Another thing that can cause academic burnout is lack of support from peers and from the school system and from parents. It could be from all of these things, it could be from one of these things. But when they're facing this lack of support, it makes it a lot harder to do what they're trying to do. And it creates just this burnt out feeling that all of these students with academic burnout are describing. Academic burnout obviously has lots of negative effects, not only in students' academic lives, but also in their personal lives. Some ways that it can be changed is if students had more intrinsic motivation. The idea of high expectations all kind of comes, for the most part, from external motivation. So if all these students had their intrinsic motivation instead of their motivation is to reach a goal and an expectation that is unreachable, then the students might be more likely to not have academic burnout. Also, by having support from schools, parents, peers, whoever it is, when students have support, they're more likely to be able to learn and to be able to keep going even when things do get hard. And also by lowering expectations, not only the lowering of expectations and not expecting so much out of yourself, but also for parents, schools, and teachers to lower their expectations of students. Because when they're having these high expectations, they're creating more students who are going to be facing burnout. Burnout can be caused in many ways, and a lot of the things intertwine along with the intertwining of the effects. And academic burnout is something that's very important to be talked about because it's something that so many people face without even knowing what they're facing. Thank you for listening.